We'll take a look at the Phillies in Clearwater. Ricky Bottalico, Phillies pre- and post-game live, will join us for a preview of Phillies spring training, which gets underway in earnest tomorrow, which is when everybody must be there. Ricky, welcome back, and another year of Phillies baseball is upon us.
Thanks, guys. Here we go again, right?
Let's go. Let's get it going. And, we just talked about 8 positions. We look like it looks like a lot of those positions are pretty locked up. Do you see it that way as well, or do you see some competition down there that maybe is under the radar?
I think the positions are pretty well locked up. I think obviously in the outfield, the 4th, 5th outfielder, those are the positions that are going to be battled for. I mean, when you look at what you have right now, you have Saunders, Kendrick, you have Herrera. I think that's pretty much a lock. You look down the infield all the way across, I think it's a lock. I mean, who's going to back up first base? I think that's a question mark. Catching-wise, how could you argue with Cameron Rupp? I mean, when you look at the starting 8, yeah, I think they're pretty much all there. Barring injuries. Come on, let's face it. It is spring training. Somebody's probably going to come down with something. So, I mean, that's the one thing to keep an eye on. And I think the most interesting position is the catcher one if somebody goes down.
Yeah, that's Cameron Rupp, who will, and he talked about the other day, it's a little odd being there because no Ruiz, no Howard. It's the first year with no 2008 player on it. So Rupp looks like the full-time guy who will be the backup there. But, Ricky, what is your thoughts on the job that Clintack did in terms of getting this starting 8 put together? Are they last year they were the worst offense in the league. Does that look like they have made steps or strides toward being a considerably better offense, a marginally better offense?
I think they should be a lot better. And the reason why I say that, I mean, you look at the corner outfielders last year and what they gave the Phillies production-wise was basically close to zero. And now you got a guy who hit 24 home runs last year. You got another guy in Howie Kendrick. If he could play up to his career numbers, I think it could be great for the Phillies. You also look at those two guys being plugged into the lineup, and what does that do for Maikel Franco? When you think about Maikel Franco, obviously he's got some power. He drives in runners. But the one thing that we saw last year is a little bit of impatience because he wasn't getting pitches to hit. He was trying to make his at-bats better than they could be, and I think that really distracted him at times. But now when you look, and he's got protection in front, he's got protection behind, I think that changes his whole way of going up to the plate. I think he could sit back and wait for his pitch a little bit more now, and I don't think he's going to see all those sliders on the outside part of the plate because you put him on, all of a sudden you got a guy in Saunders who's hit 24 home runs last year. So it's a lot better for especially the middle of the lineup. I mean, you can look up and down the lineup and say, well, it looks the same, but the corner outfielders are different. And that's something.
We got a bad connection with Ricky. We'll try to put him on hold, bring him back into the fold. I like what he's saying about the middle of the lineup there. I want to get a little deeper with him on Kendrick and Saunders because they're two of the new guys there.
That's exactly where I want to go. Kendrick and Saunders. And Michael Saunders, Mike, did you see the story that came out that he almost already was in Philadelphia, that he thought that he was already headed to Philadelphia? Michael Saunders at one point was a part of the Cliff Lee deal. Of course, the Phillies got back Tyson Gillies, J.C. Ramirez, and Philippe Amont, but it was his agent called him and told him to pack his bags. He was in Arizona. They had just moved apartments. He didn't even have a television yet, and his buddy from Toronto was watching SportsCenter, and he saw the tracker that this trade was going down. And so his agent called him, and he said, you know what? Yeah, you better pack your bags. You're going to Philadelphia. How could we forget that Cliff Lee trade in 2009 and that Cliff Lee deal in 2009? And now we find out that Michael Saunders almost was a part of that deal, Ricky Bottalico, that Michael Saunders could have been a Philly 8 years ago.
That would have been nice. I mean, the one knock on him right now is you look at Saunders and people say he's old. I don't care. Look what he did last year. Isn't that what you want to look at? I mean, the guy could play. He could hit the ball out of the ballpark. I think that's the most important thing, protection for the younger guys.
The big question the Phillies fans come up to me all the time, Ricky, and ask, and I'm sure they ask you too, when is this rebuild going to be complete? What answer do you give them?
I think the rebuild becomes complete when Crawford is up at the big league level and you have a solidified infield with Franco, Crawford. The question mark is obviously at second base. Still, there's Kingery down in the minor leagues. There's other guys. So, it's just one of those things where once all these younger players come up and are ready to play, I think that's when you have a full, we'll call it the process. The process will be complete.
On the Saunders and Kendrick stuff, because they're two of the new guys. Saunders 24 homers last year, made the All-Star game. Do you look at him as an everyday guy, more of a platoon guy? Because there's a lot of I'm counting a lot of guys in that outfield. That's going to be a crowded space at it used to be Bright House Field. What are they calling it now? Spectrum Field or something like that. It's going to be
Field.
Yeah, there you go. It's going to be crowded out at Spectrum Field in that outfield. But do you look at Saunders as an everyday player?
I think Saunders, Kendrick, and Herrera are all everyday outfielders right now. Obviously, I think you're going to give Altera a little opportunity. He didn't really get much of one last year because of his injuries. But, when you really look at it, what else are you going to do? You want protection for Franco. Those are the two guys that are going to give you protection.
Kendrick, another guy, he's been primarily an infielder. They're going to play him in left. He's not a power guy. Do you hope that somebody pushes him, or is he a guy that you're excited about adding to this lineup?
No, I think he's good. If he plays up to his potential, up to his career numbers, I think he just makes this lineup that much better. Obviously last year he had some issues. Chase Utley comes over, and all of a sudden his playing time goes downhill, and that bothers, pretty much any player that would happen to. So I look at Kendrick, and you got to say to yourself, hey, if he gets things going in the right direction, my biggest thing is in the lineup, if you could protect Maikel Franco. If you could protect him and you could make him a little bit more of a selective hitter up the plate, it makes everybody better in that lineup. And with two veterans coming in, probably one above him, one batting below him, I think it's just a good mix for the Phillies right now. I think they're going to be about 8 to 10 games better than last year.
Hey, Ricky, there's a move out there that maybe didn't raise a lot of attention, but they gave an invite to Chris Coughlin. Is he a factor, a guy that was a World Series champion last year, a Rookie of the Year in 2009? Is this one of those moves that maybe doesn't make a big splash when they do it, but could end up paying off dividends for the Phillies?
Well, it's called veteran presence, and the one thing Pete Mackanin likes, especially behind the plate, is a veteran-type guy and veterans on the bench. So, the question I think that brings up is who's going to be the one, who are going to be the guys that are going to be his veteran presences. You look at Hannigan, they bring him, they got Coughlin. All these guys can be present on the bench. So, I think it just really depends on the younger guys, the Nick Williams type guys, those types, to see when they're going to be ready and if they're going to be ready. Coughlin could play, obviously, but, is he going to be necessarily ready or necessarily going to be the guy? I think it's going to be a little struggle between Mackanin and Klentak, if you will. I just really believe that whoever shows up in spring training and whoever's playing well and has the right attitude stays.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Nick Williams. That's who I was going to ask you about next. I know he's working with the new hitting coach, Matt Stairs, but is this the season that Nick Williams finally pays off and blossoms to what the Phillies thought he could be?
I think the Phillies are hoping. Last year was somewhat abysmal. He hit, 250 down in AAA. His at-bats were not productive. I think that was the biggest thing that the Phillies pointed out is that, he went down there, he was striking out too much, he wasn't walking, his on-base percentage was low. You put those things together, and you have a guy in Matt Klentak who goes by the numbers, goes by the on-base percentage. If he continues to do that down in AAA, that's not going to work. That's not going to be a formula to get him to the big leagues. I think what Nick Williams has to do is go down, be a little bit more patient, go after his pitches. Stop swinging at pitchers' pitches, but that's a learning experience in AAA. So do I think that he's going to get better this year? Yeah, I would say he almost has to. I think he's in a situation right now where if he puts up numbers down there, especially early on in the season, it's going to be a quick jump to the big leagues.
Ricky Bottalico is with us, Comcast Sportsnet, pre and post, and, of course, the Phillies back at spring training. Herrera gets the big deal. What'd you think of that? Because, he's had some inconsistencies. There's been times when, they've had to move him up and down the lineup, and it seems – I was surprised. I know it seems like a good deal in terms of we got this guy long-term, but I actually thought he was a candidate to be traded in the offseason. It seemed like they were, looking for Quinn maybe to take that spot or something. I was kind of surprised when they signed him.
Well, I think maybe when the Phillies really looked at it deeper, they thought to themselves, this could be a better, fit than anybody else that's down in the minors. I think at some point you have to reevaluate yourself, and they may have looked down and said, well, is Nick Williams going to be the guy we think he is? Anybody coming up? I mean, obviously you got Cousins and Hoskins and all these guys that can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but I mean, Herrera is the only one that's proven in the big leagues that he can hit the baseball. I mean, granted, last year he went through a slump for about 3 weeks, but he got himself out of it, and that's part of being a big leaguer. I just think, why not keep him? I mean, he's frustrating at times to fans. He's frustrating to us, but I mean, he gets the job done, and he, whether he does it with a little flash or whatnot, who cares? Go out there, play the game, and he plays the game hard, and he has fun. I mean, the fans relate to this guy, so I don't think it was a terrible move by the Phillies. You could still trade him. I mean, that's not the point. The point is you signed him. You signed him for less for a longer period of time.
All right, pitching is what McPhail said the other day. Pitching, and then when we want to get better, we're going to get more pitching. It's a good way to go, it seems like on the surface, but they got a lot of pitching this year, Ricky. You look at Hellickson and Nola and Buchholz and Eichhoff and Velasquez. Those five, are they the five that you think will be the first five when opening day comes around? Because you got Jake Thompson and Zach Eflin, and there's a lot of young arms in this organization. Do you think those five are set, or do you think there is some good competition in that starting rotation?
I think today I would say 4 of them are probably set. I think the other thing is watching Aaron Nola's injuries. I think, he's going to be the most watched guy in spring training. I think we all agree on that. And if he comes up a little lame or his elbow's still hurting him, I think that's the guy that will be questionable in that lineup. I really believe that it's going to go something like Hellickson, Eichhoff, because I'll tell you what, Eichhoff showed me a lot last year. This is a guy that came into this organization, and he has made his presence felt. And I think that's a huge key. He looks like nothing phases him on the mound. I put him in the 2 spot. I would put Buchholz 3rd, Velasquez 4 right now, and Nola tentative 5.
Ricky Bottalico with us now. Ricky, I saw you on CSN talking about Clay Buchholz. It didn't sound like you're exactly thrilled with his performance so far. Where do you stand on Clay Buchholz and what he can bring to the Phillies?
Well, I'll tell you this, Mike. I mean, Clay's got good stuff. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but he's never really put it together for big bundles of innings throughout a year. So I think what you're getting is a grizzled vet that knows how to pitch. I mean, granted, he pitched. Here's the one thing that's a positive. I didn't bring this up yesterday when I was on, but here's the one thing that's positive about Buchholz. Let's face it, he was pitching in the American League East his whole career. Not the easiest place to pitch. I think we're all in agreement. And now he's going to the Phillies, which I think it's a much better place to, not necessarily stadium-wise, but a better place to pitch considering the opposition that you're facing. So I think that's a bonus for him. The one thing I just want to see him is go a little deeper into games and stay healthy. I think that's been a big kick on him, especially the last 2 or 3 years, that he can't stay healthy. So, I mean, it's hard to be all fired up about a guy who I believe his top innings is like 179 for his career. So, I mean, you tell me.
Yeah, no, he's a guy that, he had a couple of breakout years, all-star campaigns, but you're right. He seems like one of those guys that infuriates you because you see it in him and you want to see it out of him more consistently.
That is a perfect way to look at it. I think you look at Buchholz and his second start of his big league career, he throws a no-hitter. I think you expected more of that from him. And I think what you've gotten is more mediocrity from a guy who's got a monster arm. And that's bothersome at times.
I know how you feel there, Ricky. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. You watch a lot of these guys, and it is frustrating. I want to get your take on Velasquez because electric arm, we talked about him last year, and you were very candid about, him needing to learn how to be a pitcher instead of a thrower after that game where he had all the strikeouts. You were a guy who was at the back end of a bullpen. Do you look at him as more of a back-end bullpen guy, or is he a major league starter?
At this point in his career, obviously they're going to keep him as a starter right now. But, I mean, I see him as a power guy in a closer's role. I really do. But, I mean, my biggest thing with him is, I mean, look at his pitch counts. You know, there's certain games you'll look up in the third inning and it's 50 to 60 pitches. You can't do that as a starter. That's why I said you want to see him pitch more, which means trusting your off-speed stuff. He's young. Let's face it. When you're young in the big leagues, you want, especially when you could throw as hard as he could, you want to just deal. You want to just light it up. And I understand that. I watched a guy like Curt Schilling go in there first 3 innings, first time through the lineup, throw all fastballs and get away with it. And all of a sudden after that, then it started mixing it up again. Nobody saw anything but fastballs. That's a good thing to do if you could hit your spots. And that's what I want to see Velasquez do. I want to see him be able to go to one spot, whether it be the outside corner, the inside corner, consistently all the time. And that's his go-to spot. That's what you need as a starting pitcher when you're off a little bit. You have to be able to go to that one pitch in the one spot. And I did not see that from him last year, except for in that one game where he struck out, 16 Padres.
Ricky Bottalico with us, and when you have the former Phillies closer on, then we should talk about that position, right, Ricky Bo? And I know Pete McCannon has said Janmar Gomez to start, but I'd like you to handicap the closer position for us and how you see that breaking down.
Well, obviously, here's what I think Pete is thinking. Well, if we don't put Gomez in that spot, he's going to be already down in the dumps about it. I think you give him an opportunity to lose the job, which is what Pete is doing. Look, he did it last year at the beginning of the year. Come on, he had 4 guys try before Janmar stepped in and got the job done.
Yeah,
he's got to prove to everybody that he's actually that tough guy, the tough guy to go out there mentally in the 9th inning. He didn't do that last year because he failed. I mean, quite frankly, he was really good early on. Then he lost his sync a little bit. And when that happens, you have to start hitting your spots. He started nibbling on the corners, walking guys. Then he'd have to come over the plate. He'd get beat around the ballpark a little bit. All of a sudden, your ERA goes from a 2.7 to a 4.9. I mean, you know, that to me shows you didn't know how to get yourself out of trouble. And right now, what I look at is that he's going to get the start in the closer's role. I think Hector Neris at some point will take that role over.
Neris was a guy who I was going to throw into the mix, and they brought in the veteran Joaquin Benoit. But also, I was impressed.
40.
Yes, yes. I was going to throw in though Ramos last year. I was impressed with that young kid. He seems like he could be the Neris from last year.
I see what you mean. I think young. You know, you got to get him some big league innings under his belt before you throw him into the fire. But I think. Yeah, if he gets an opportunity, I definitely think he's got the arm that could possibly do it at the back end. I just like Neris. I mean, he came in, he did his job, he never complained about his job, and when he was called on later, he got that done. And the one thing about him, when he went into a slump, it was very short, and that's one thing about young guys. It's hard to get out of slumps. You saw it with Gomez, couldn't get out of it. Neris is able to do that. He understands that it's one game at a time. That's the thing that scared me a little bit about Gomez is that I didn't feel like he was taking it one game at a time when he started failing. I think he took it into a big clump. And when you do that, you put that into your own skull, that's when issues start.
So the bullpen, there is some competition at the bullpen. That should be something to watch down there at spring training. The pitching should be fun. You talked about the 8. My question for you then, Ricky, would be, you got a lot of young guys on this team. When is their time? The Crawfords, the Williams, the Alfaros, the Cousins, the all the guys that we've been hearing, Hoskins. When is the right time for those guys?
Quite frankly, it's up to them. It really is. The ball is in their court. If you do get sent down to AAA, you put up the numbers. You do what the Phillies – they want to see a guy like Cousins not necessarily do exactly what he did last year because that's really hard to do. But they want to see him hit for power. They want to see him cut down on his strikeouts. Very simple. So do that. You will be up in the big leagues. You look at Hoskins. I think he just continues to play, get some seasoning in AAA. I think he ends up at the big league level. Williams, we already talked about. J.P. Crawford, I think he's still got work to do. I really believe that. I mean, we've heard so much about Crawford and how good he's supposed to be. He hasn't gotten to that point yet. He hasn't impressed me as much as I think the name impresses everybody. if that makes any sense.
Sure. I want to ask you real quick because over my shoulder here on your network, Comcast Sportsnet, I see Aaron Nola, and you mentioned him as the number 5, and I think that's ironic because he might be the best pitcher on the rotation, right? Like the least amount of thrower, the smartest guy, the nibbler, the smartest pitcher. He might be the best mental pitcher that they have.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, I don't know what direction they're going to go with because if he's healthy and he's throwing the ball well, he's not necessarily a number 5. I just put him at that number 5 because the question's about his elbow.
Right.
I mean, I think it's very simple. I think, when you have something wrong with your elbow, that doesn't mean, you come back, you rehab it, and it's going to be good for a long period of time. It could come back at any point. That's what scares me.
Yeah, it's like stuff-wise, he might be the worst guy, but in terms of smart-wise, he might be the best guy. But I really agree with you on Eichhoff. And a lot of, that's one thing. You talk about, we always say, they got to make this trade. They got to get rid of these guys. You also got to hit on some of these trades, and you got to give them credit. Ricky, they have hit on a lot of these trades. The return they have gotten, a lot of these guys are made their way into the majors and are knocking on the door. They've done a really good job making trades, and when they finally separated from those guys, they got good returns. That's something that has this organization moving in the right direction.
Yeah, the Texas Rangers, the Phillies just took everything they had when you think about it. But, when you really think about being a minor leaguer in the Phillies organization right now, they have to be licking their chops. You don't think Cousins, when he was hitting all those home runs last year, was like, yeah, that's right, I'm right here. That's the greatest thing about competition, about younger guys, is that they know most of the players that are getting pushed up to the big leagues and have been there. And they know they can play with those guys. And if they have a good season, they're going to be right there with them. So I think the whole thing of being hungry down the minor leagues is a whole new level for the Phillies because it's open. Let's face it. There are positions that are not necessarily set in stone, but obviously there's two, let's face it, even middle of this year, there could be 2 outfield positions wide open. So if you're putting up numbers in the minor leagues, boom. Pitchers are going to get called up left and right because people get hurt. Boom. Those guys have got to be hungry. The only position that you're really looking at is third base. Right?
Yeah.
If you're a third baseman, you're probably not in a good mood being in the Phillies organization.
Ricky Bottalico here on Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, Comcast Sportsnet, your home for Phillies baseball. Of all the games, you'll see plenty of Ricky as the Phillies, as you mentioned, 8 to 10 games. Hopefully, that would be a successful year. If they can get another 10 wins under their belt, that should make for a good summer of Phillies baseball. Ricky, we hope to talk to you throughout the year, pal.
You got it, guys.